guys, this is going to be kind of a weird episode that we weren't really planning on, but we just got lunch in the middle of recording, and we're having a really good conversation, and I just want to keep it going on the microphone. Or how do you guys feel about that?
Well, I'm sitting here, so I think I've agreed to it.
Collectively feel pretty good about it.
So, Dustin, I feel like you would actually do the best job recapping what we've talked about so far.
Yeah, I can't remember what we were even talking about. No, I can't. So let me see if I do a good job. If I don't do a good job, somebody else recap it. But we were talking about the podcast. We're talking about you as a person who has gone through deconstruction, or you're in the midst of deconstruction, and you're starting to find that. Don't let me put words in your mouth, but you're starting to feel like, oh, maybe this deconstruction is going to stay deconstructed at the end. Maybe I'm just going to be deconstructed, and there's no reconstruction that may happen. It may or may not happen, but right now you're kind of feeling like maybe it won't.
And I don't think anyone realized that that's how I thought this podcast was supposed to be.
Right.
Because you were fascinated, because I said, Danny, I don't know if I'm going to continue to be Christian enough for this podcast.
Yeah.
And you were like...
And my joke was, you've already not been for a long time.
But you were like, the point of the podcast isn't to watch Emily go through it and get back to a good spot. Mm-hmm. And I guess I really thought that.
Well, the interesting part of the podcast, in my opinion, is that there's a holy man and a person who's struggling with their faith.
It's like when we were on the street and Danny goes, I'm a pastor, she's a comedian.
Yeah. And this fat guy holds a camera. And that's what he said. But that's, so what I think is fascinating about this podcast is that, well, first of all, you're very honest and open. I think if you weren't, it wouldn't work. Did you get your lips plumped?
I just put on chapstick.
Okay, but you don't get shots in there?
They're very glossy.
All right. Just you've lost some weight, so I'm just wondering.
Can I say really quick? Danny's not the first pastor that's approached me to start a podcast with me.
Oh,
did you know that?
Wow,
yeah.
Look at you. Oh.
That is because I know that. So why? Well, maybe you're gonna say this, but why this one and why not that? Like,
so the
have
other
you seen
pastor...
yourself? You're beautiful.
I need you in my life more often.
You're a beautiful man.
You're like one of the greatest compliments.
Danny's gonna make that his ringtone. Just Dustin going, "You're a beautiful man," over and over again. But the other pastor was like, he wanted to call it Revangelical.
Yeah.
He basically said, I want to capture pastoring you through your deconstruction back to where you were. That was his words. Uh-huh. And for a little bit, I was like, it's a great idea. I need to get back there.
When I first met you, you were like, I think I'm going to do this podcast.
Yeah.
I remember we sat here. You asked me why Jesus had to die on the cross. And just before that, you were like, hey, this pastor of mine is interested in doing a podcast and you said it, but like, you're like, to pastor me through deconstruction.
Yeah. But it's like this, technically, I guess you're pastoring me through deconstruction, but not to like get me out of it or get me through it, but to just be another voice and another pair of eyes on the situation that I can't always see clearly as someone who's in it. Would you say that's fair?
I think so. Like I did just think in my mind, like why, because I am a pastor that is your friend, and this person is a pastor that was a better friend at one point, and both asked you. So there had to be some level of comfortability in your assumption of what the experience would be like, which was probably different. But I also think like in the same way that this was birthed out of our conversations, like at a Panera around this table, I think part of the reason we're still going, why we're doing the episode like this, is like, I think we found as much or probably more personal fruit through the conversation we had after recording, before recording it at lunch. And I think it's like, I wonder, had we not had all of the conversations surrounding not just the episodes, if this would have felt as life-giving. Because in some ways it's just like continually sharing your story. But I think there's like a iron sharpening iron. We push, we disagree, but none of us have stopped being friends through that. And I think that's what's really interesting is like, we talk about all the time, we're modeling on here, how can we be friends, disagree, have hard conversations. I think the three of us have done that at a pretty high level, because I think of some of the stuff, I really wish we had a recorder, like all the stuff we've talked about afterwards, which is a little divergent from what your initial question was, but I think getting into it was one thing, but sticking with it, I just think the relationship is probably part of the reason we're still doing this.
But also part of the reason why I think I was more willing to have this podcast with you is because, one, I didn't feel like there was as much of a power dynamic of like the pastor and the rando, but it's like, but also I think you really care what I have to say. And I think
Yeah.
you really value my opinion.
Sure.
And that is huge.
Yeah. No.
Because I didn't experience that from a pastor or spiritual leader ever.
Yeah, and there were other things outside this podcast where, like, if you believe that, actions probably spoke that to be
Absolutely.
a reality.
For sure. But so let's get into more of what we were talking about.
For sure.
We kind of did a recap. I'm going to share the analogy that I shared with you because I think that was what sparked the conversation. I don't know if you.
I know. I walk away for like 2 seconds and I come back
and
you
then
guys
we're
are
like
a deep conversation.
We're not yelling, but like we're going at it.
I won the argument. She's a Christian again.
Embrace the journey. The journey is over.
This will be our last episode.
I said, this is where I'm honestly at in my faith. So sorry to anyone who's watching this. I mean, it's really hard for me to say this on the camera because I know that people who know me will watch this. The way I feel toward Christianity right now is a relationship or a marriage that I have put so much into. I've poured everything into making this relationship work. And I'm like, well, I'm going to just fight tooth and nail for it to work so that my efforts were not in vain. And everyone's like, bro, just break up. It's a toxic relationship. Just get divorced. It's better for everyone.
Yeah.
And that is where I'm at.
So Dustin, like what was your, like before I got into it, what were you guys talking about in regards to that?
Well, I think, that she is in a relationship with religion, not Jesus. I think that she's been taught her whole life a very specific set of rules and ways to be, which I understand. I mean, that's a lot of Christianity. I don't know that it's specifically evangelical Christianity or whatever, but like I definitely know there's a lot of churches that, you're out there checking boxes. I think you said in a previous podcast about like the quiet time or time you had with God. It was really much. It was very much like a check box, a box to check. Dustin, a box to check.
Maybe now you won't yell at us about that anymore.
And then no, I'll still yell. And then once it was done, you felt good about yourself.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, I spent time with God and I had some edifying thing happen because I spent time with God. It was just like, oh, I did it. So good job for me today. I did what I was supposed to do, like doing your homework or something. Yeah. And if you didn't do it, you would feel guilty, feel bad about yourself throughout the day. And like that would be like if like my kids, I have a kid in high school and a kid in middle school. When my kids leave for the day, if they don't say goodbye to me, I just go, oh, like it kind of just hurts a little, They didn't do anything wrong. I'm not mad at them. I'm not upset with them. I love them like crazy, but they didn't say goodbye. And I just love them because I love that I get the hug before they go to school and I can say, hey, have a great day, whatever. And your thing is that that's what your quiet time was. Like, oh, like you're checking a box because it wasn't like a relationship.
But it was even less than it was like, it's not just checking a box. It was like appeasing his disgust with me for a little bit. I'm not trying to be dramatic.
Yeah. And that's just bad theology. And that's what we talked about.
I get that, but that messes with your head.
I totally understand. Yeah. I'm not saying that it doesn't have an effect. I'm just saying now as you deconstruct, you're deconstructing, hopefully on some level, out of bad theology. Yeah. Not just I don't want to be around God or be about this faith thing or anything, right? Like if you're really thinking it through, you're going, okay, here's some of the things that I learned that I'm trying to unlearn because these are not actually biblical principles.
I will say what's interesting, like just observing this part of the conversation too, is like, I remember when we started this talking about like assumptions going in, I thought we were having a deconstructing Jesus podcast. And like, I think that's really interesting. And I knew like your religious upbringing, but I didn't know to the level and scope how much your Calvinist theology informed how you viewed everything.
Yeah.
And it's been really helpful for me actually, because I asked you a question a podcast or two ago of like what theological things that you were taught as a child have influenced in your things as an adult. But those have been really good questions for me to ask. It's like, why do I believe what I believe? Yeah. And is it a belief tied to Jesus or to the institution? And I think that's like a really interesting thing. And I just wonder, this maybe like sound like a really flat, stupid question, but where are you on the whole Jesus thing versus the church? So maybe just talk about Jesus, but then if you have the bandwidth to talk about church. 'Cause I think they're different, but in this conversation, we often conflate them.
Well, and that's the thing is like, one, you said at lunch, you said you're still a Calvinist in your heart. And I think you're right. Like, I would love to not be, but that is not something that's easily let goable.
Yeah.
But going back to like Jesus, is you said something really interesting. Weird. If going with this relationship analogy, it's helpful to me. Like you were like, but it's a relationship with kids. And so let's say you're trying to divorce you're trying to divorce religion, but like your faith is the kid, or like in kind of my relationship with Jesus then is one of the kids.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, I feel like you were in a marriage with the church, and out of that birth a faith in Jesus.
Wow. Oof.
And you're trying to get divorced to the church. And I use it as like because you said, you're like, well, every time I look at my kids, I see my spouse. And I was like, I'm a divorced guy with 3 kids, 2 from a previous marriage. I see my ex-wife every time I look at those kids, right? And so there's some level of that. And so, yeah, but I think that's right. I think you were married to the church. Jesus, in your faith in him, was birthed out of that. But you're reconciling a pretty messy divorce.
But it's like, how do you not get triggered with your kids?
I think you do. I think you do for a while. I think he probably.
I'm sorry, you don't have to answer that. Also,
I slap him around a lot. No,
no, but I mean, like, my assumption is that, just like if you lived in the house that you guys all lived in, and then you got a divorce and you stayed in that house, everything's going to look like, you're going to remember have all these memories about her and about this and that. And I think eventually it probably is a little bit less and less and less, right?
Yeah. Like I look at my kids, and I mean, people say my kids look like me, but I can still see like features.
For sure.
But there's a difference between features of someone and then seeing the visceral image of that person, right? Like seeing the totality of them. So we've built new memories, right? We've built new framework. We've built new rhythms because we're in a new house and we have a new family and we have a new structure, right? And so now when I look at them, I could be like, oh, I can see their mom's nose in them, but I see them as individual people. And the thing that I was trying to move past was seeing my ex-wife as a person in my kids. And now I see the features that remain, and that's not their identity. And I think I conflated the identity probably.
And I think absolutely. And that's the conflating thing, right? Is like, because you said something along the lines of like, I think you're conflating religion is the same as Jesus. And I was like, 1,000,000% I am, because that is all I knew how to do. Like they couldn't be separate. It was like, Jesus because of our very specific religion, and we know exactly what Jesus thought and exactly what he was like because we are correct theologically. And so that's the thing, right? It's like, it's so hard. So it's twofold. It's one, to still have a relationship with Jesus is reminding me all the time of this thing I'm trying to freaking divorce. But also the only way, like, it's like, but the only way I knew how to look at Jesus was through my spouse.
Mm-hmm. Which is
that making sense?
Yeah. Also, though, it's like another microcosm of if you were a man and you were divorcing evangelicalism, you'd have a different experience, right? But I think being even a woman, like you didn't even have the keys to your faith at the highest level. And so it's like, I think that plays into it too. Like I wonder, I mean, you grew up pretty evangelical. You said you were a Reformed pastor, right? And you've deconstructed or reconstructed you would probably say you're a mutt, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think I also wonder, and I don't want to, this maybe is not a helpful rabbit trail to go down, but I do think being a woman within the process of this has a lot of different spider legs to it, because it's like, you didn't even have that much power in your own faith as a Calvinist, but as a woman, you've surrendered the little faith you have to the men in the room, right? And so I don't know. I think all the time how helpless I would feel if I was you growing up in the church experience you grew up in.
So helpless. Like I would sit in the Presbyterian seminary library. I wasn't a member of the seminary. I just would go and sit among the theology books and be like, I just want someone to notice that I'm putting in the same work of knowing the same things. And even like as I'm packing up my theology books to sell, it's packing up the which is maybe why people's opinions still matter to me so much, is because it's packing up and giving up on the journey that people in my past church will finally theologically respect me. And I am losing that respect by the day being where I'm at. And that is freaking brutal, because it's all I wanted is for someone to say, yeah, Emily's a girl, but Emily knows her shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know that. I mean, I think those all tie together, but I also think that knowing a whole bunch about theology or religion, it's not really that helpful. I mean,
Exhibit A.
Well, I mean, I know for me, like, even though I'm kind of a mutt, like, I came out of a place where I fell in love with Jesus first, not a denomination or an organization or even a church that I went to, you know? And so it wasn't the end all be all. And I think one of the things, maybe I'm wrong, but that's going to be hard for you is that because you were so entrenched in it, and your whole family, isn't your whole family is in it. When you talk about seeing the features of your religion in Jesus, you're going to still hopefully see your parents and go to Thanksgiving, and you're going to be around these people that are your family of origin, unless it's such to an abusive level that you have to divorce all that. And you're going to keep seeing that. And I think that's hard. I mean, you didn't keep hanging out with your ex-wife all the time after you got divorced. I didn't hang out with my ex-wife ever, like maybe twice more, you know?
Yeah.
You just don't see them anymore. And that's helpful in the healing process.
Yeah, I even just saw, this is actually just to connect with that. I was at a soccer game, and my ex-wife's mom's brother and his wife were there. So like aunt and uncle. And were in town. And I genuinely really they were some of my favorite people. And I saw them. And this is the first time I've seen them since the divorce. And it's been years. And I had like visceral reactions of like, they're dead to me. Mm-hmm. And then like eventually I went over and I talked to the guy, and we had a really great conversation about some of the jokes he used to make in college football. But my visceral reaction based on previous experience in my divorce was the first lens. And I think that's an interesting thing to think about. It's like, I still saw it initially through this way, but I had enough time removed where I mentally had a conversation with myself of being like, well, they haven't done anything to me. And like, they are I had to work myself into being like, I'm going to go talk to people, not like be weird and hang out. So I don't know. I just think that's interesting too. It's like, you see glimpses of these things everywhere. And for the rest of your life, you will likely see glimpses of this experience.
But imagine if you if you were trying to talk to them and it was like the week after your divorce and they were at the soccer game. Yeah, that would be so hard. Mm-hmm. And so it's like I was saying at lunch, like, I just need a break. Like, I literally, I know that you can't take a break from your kids, but it's like for something that's that triggering, I just need it all to go away for a little bit and then to start bringing things back in, because I can't, I want to so bad, but I cannot separate Jesus and my upbringing right now. Mm-hmm. He feels like part of the abuser. That's a very intense word, but like part of the thing that hurt me.
He is as much entrenched in the system as any of the theology that you were taught.
And I know I can say that that's not true, but that is not how it feels. And that's not the reaction that I feel. Because I had a pastor say to me, he goes, when I was going to your church, no, not that I'm not going anymore. I'm just saying when he realized that I go.
So when you know what I'm saying? Going?
Sounds like it to me.
That's what I meant, is when he found out I was going.
Sure, yeah.
And he goes, Emily, are you really going to tell me that Jesus sounds like the Jesus of the Bible? Like the inclusive Jesus? Or the Jesus you always learned about? That's what he said. Does this Jesus sound like the Jesus you always learned about? No. And he said, where's your fear of the Lord? Gone. I'm not freaking scared of him anymore. And I don't know why you want me to be scared. And I don't know why you want me to have this harsh image of Jesus who is so grossed out by me, but also wants eternity with me. No, the new Jesus I know doesn't sound like that. And I'm so glad. But it's so hard. It's like if Danny had told me about you, Dustin, every day for 20 years, that you hated people who are deaf in their right ear and hated female comedians and all these things about me. Mm. And then we're supposed to be friends. And then how I've communed with you, why are we using that word? I don't know, has been great. I really enjoy my time with you. But all that's still in the back of my mind. Like, does he really think all of these things about me?
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, one of the things we talked about at lunch was time, and how time hopefully will heal the wounds and they'll be less potent.
Well, I also think too, like, you and I came to know Jesus as dummies, right? Like we got knowledge second and relationship first, and you had knowledge first, right? And I think even about what you said, like using this analogy, like Dustin, because I knew Dustin first, right?
Yeah.
Like, but I didn't really talk. I was, hey, we're doing this podcast. You guys met. You guys made some jokes. You guys were like, oh, we kind of like each other, and you guys have built a relationship afterwards. But friendship before knowledge of Dustin was first, and I think that's one bias I see from our perspective. It's probably hard for us to get exactly where you are, because we had a relationship first, so we had trust and we had connection and relational chips with Jesus. And you've been on your side. It's like, I've been told so much about this guy that looks nothing like the person that we probably talk about. If that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And that's so interesting. I was talking to someone the other day who adopted a kid when the kid was 12. And my friend was saying, he was like, we never had the like cuddling, bonding phase of like all this trust. Like, it started off in the teen phase, and that's very hard. And we don't have that trust built up and all of that. And I think that's similar-ish to when, not that like it's this like we're going right into the really hard stuff, and I never just like cuddled with Jesus. You know, I think you kind of know what I'm
Well, I think about like with Annie and my kids, right? It's like she's like, who is this person, right? Like, even if you have no like if they're going to be a person, like adoption, right, or being a parent, or being like, that's different. The stakes were pretty low with Dustin. You don't like Dustin, you're like, screw this guy.
For sure.
And I'm glad you guys like each other, because it's one of the things that warms my heart on a personal note, that you guys like talk outside of this, and you guys have built a friendship. Because when my friends become friends, I think that's really cool. But like for my kids and Annie, like that was, again, it wasn't starting at zero.
Right.
And with Jesus right now, you're not really starting at zero.
No, I'm starting with a lot of baggage. A lot of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Imagine, like, let's say, like, if you told your kids, Annie sucks so much, and she really hates you, and she hates all kids, and she's mean, she's going to lock you in your room, and then you were like, why don't you, like, adore her? Yeah. And they'd be like, what the hell?
Well, I wonder, though, what's interesting, though, about the conversation is that, I suppose, if that were the case, if he said a whole bunch of stuff and they trust their dad, and then she shows up and she's not like that, and they would be like, she's awesome. Like, what are you talking about?
You're supposed to trust what you see in front of you or what your dad told you, right?
Exactly. And so the thing you're going through is that these people that you trusted and that you respected said a whole bunch of things about someone, but what's cool about it is that you can read it yourself. You can go look at how Jesus treated people.
But see, I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead.
But to see, I'm just going with the analogy, to see that Annie isn't like that, to see that Annie is very kind, just reminds me that, or would just remind your kids that you betrayed them and didn't trust and didn't like use their trust well. Mm-hmm. That is hard. Even though Annie's being lovely, it's painful, and you feel rejected and hurt and betrayed.
Yeah. I think it would be I think that's one of the most interesting pressure points of this, is it's less of it. And I've said this before, maybe not on this podcast, but over lunch, that I think this is way less of a Jesus thing than it is a church thing, or a religiosity thing, or a dogma thing.
But he is totally caught up in the middle of it right now. Which is why I just need a
because
break.
You can't pull those things apart as they're so enmeshed. Mm-hmm. And it may not be his fault, but he's stuck in the midst of it. And I think that's where there's this like, actually we had that conversation with the New Evangelicals with Tim, and he had called Deconstruction the untangling. And I feel like that's more, not even more so what you're doing, but like in some of our off-camera interactions are untangling in a lot of ways, because it's not as much like, let's pull this away, let's throw this away. It's like, where are the webs of interconnectivity in all of this, and what doesn't need to be tangled up in this anymore.
Well, one of the things, let me ask you this. So one of the
Okay.
things you keep saying is you need a break. I need a break.
I freaking do.
What does that mean?
I just need, like, I need to be like functionally an atheist for a little bit is what I mean by that. There was just this like total side note. I was unpacking. I just moved into a new apartment and I was unpacking all my books, and there's one book that just called "What Is Hell," and I sent it to my coworker, and she goes, "Emily, it is good to be a Christian, but that is a lot." And I was like, "You're so right." And she goes, "Also, you don't know what is hell? I'll tell you what is hell: atheism." And I was like, "What is happening?" It was just very funny. But like, all that to say, that was not really a necessary story, but it just made me laugh. But I just like to go no contact for a little bit, to like just see if the wounds can scab over just a little bit, that I can maybe start to like actually see them, instead of like they just keep getting like rubbed raw every time anything like remotely Christian happens. Like, I know that sounds extreme, but like that is how I'm feeling right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So maybe not, and I'm not trying to tell you what to think, but maybe not becoming atheist as much as just pushing pause on any form of religious intake.
That's what I mean by functionally atheist.
Yeah.
Of like, it's not that that's what I think, but it's just that is how I live my life.
Okay.
For a tad, so that I can just like, it's like, it literally feels like a breather.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am so tired of like fighting for this relationship that's just not getting easier. Like, I feel like I deserve to have somewhat of a relationship that doesn't hurt me every time I think about it.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm being very intense this whole episode, but this is how I'm feeling.
I think it's honest. I'd rather have you be honest.
It's very honest.
And I mean, you said this at lunch, right? You asked yourself if you were going to be honest today or pretend to
100%
be something else. And I'm glad you chose honesty.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that's what faith should be. I think that's what friendship should be. And I feel like all of this, again, like if all of this stopped, say we stopped recording, right? Say the well wasn't a church. Say we had none of these other things. I'd hope we'd still be in a relationship, the three of us. And I think
Absolutely.
that's the hope of this, is like, let's just be really honest and say, like, this isn't about episodes and anything like that. It's about like, we may be recording this and it's going to help other people, and it's great that it's doing that. But this is like friends having important conversations. And I remember in our first or second episode, you said church is a place where like big ideas are wrestled with. And I think like I think we're doing a better version of church now than we often do on a Sunday, and that's like wrestling with big topics.
But it's also like back to a few episodes ago, I've never experienced that, to say I need a break from a space or I disagree from a space, and have people stick with me.
Yeah, because you had a lot of shame from, I mean, you've talked about how you have a shame lens to begin with. Mm-hmm. But you had a lot of shame from when you stepped away from the church, because it was like, when are you coming back? And so to say you want to be a functional atheist is like the biggest shameful decision you can make from the lens that you were previously looking through.
Because when I started this process, this is interesting. When I started this process, I said, I'm reformed enough to believe, reformed enough meaning that I don't think anything can snatch me out of God's hand. I'm reformed enough to believe that I can go on this journey and keep my salvation. That's how it started. I think I said that before, like, I started this journey. I felt the freedom to start this journey because of Reformed theology. But I was the first to tell, this is going to be a very weird parallel, but it's just like when I would tell people that I, as a woman, wanted to go to seminary, I would say, like, I want to go to seminary not to be a pastor so you don't have to panic. I would say, like, I'm deconstructing just a little bit, don't panic. And it keeps going. And I'm just like, I'm on the freaking conveyor belt. And I'm like, I think this is important and I think it's good, but I promised everyone I wasn't going to go this far.
But you also promised people you'd go to seminary, but you wanted to be a pastor. So you can say, don't worry. Like,
that's true. It's not what I wanted.
And so I wonder what you really wanted when you got into deconstruct. Like, I think, name it or not, you were hoping to pull away all of those things, and you just said, "Don't worry for other people." Yeah. That wasn't actually what you thought.
Dang, I think you may be right.
Yeah, unlike Dustin, I was trying to put words in your mouth there, but
no, that's how. I don't think I would have been able to name that myself, but I need to process that a little more. But I think you might be right.
One of the things I appreciate is you often put things in parallels, which for me is really like, so seminary versus deconstruction.
That it's very helpful to me, but it can be annoying to people. So I'm glad that you.
I find it really helpful because
I find it annoying.
I could see the parallels, and I try to draw those because I'm kind of an analogies person anyway. So
good for you.
I would say, and you're gonna say, like, I appreciate now, like, because the first third of this maybe was catching us up from where we were at lunch, and I've enjoyed where we've gone post lunch because all of that has been stuff I didn't know we were gonna talk about, so I've been excited about it.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, like you drew the parallel of like me being like you and I's relationship, and you were like, but you wouldn't do that with me, so I would say that you would do that with God. Yeah, that's all I was gonna say.
Did I say that on this episode?
No.
Okay, you're wearing the same shirt. It's hard to tell.
Get over it.
Emily
only has one shirt, so please go to their what's it called, Patreon.
What do we think? Is there any more we want to dive into on this? I don't want to wrap this up, but it seems like we've either hit a stopping point or a turning point.
No, I just think, like, if you look at it from 35,000 feet, I fully can understand where you're coming from.
Thank you.
As far as like the relationship that you built with God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, whatever, was built under a structure, and that structure, because we're humans, it wasn't perfect. It was, and in your case, it was harmful. It was painful.
Yeah.
And you and I started in a relationship, which I think is really insightful, as opposed to like knowing all the things or being like inundated, brainwashed, whatever you want to call it, with all of this information. I get my information about Jesus and about my faith in him just straight from the New Testament, and what he taught and how he was, like his vibe, like how he was with people, right? Like, and so when your pastor says things about like, wait, they love everybody over there, that's not the Jesus you were raised in. I mean, I don't know what they're even talking about. Like, it sounds so bizarre to me because I could just literally name you, Nicodemus. I could go down a list of people that were the outcast dirtbags that Jesus chose to hang out with, not condemn. I mean, he definitely had words with some of them and said, hey, this thing that you're doing, this action is sin, and so stop it. But he also, he was always loving first, inclusive first. And I just don't understand a group of people teaching something so incorrect.
Yeah, but most churches are inclusive first or loving first. They'll love you until you're in, and then they'll be like, well, now here's the real thing.
Yeah, but I don't like church, so I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about Jesus.
I'm saying again, it's this like, we draw the parallels as if this is the distinction. Like, like people always say like, oh, well, the church or you, not Jesus, which is true or whatever, but they used his freaking name. Like, and sometimes I struggle with this. Can I say that? Like, I get that in the Gospels, Jesus is very inclusive, and I grew up not seeing that. But then as I try to read the Gospels again, I see pockets of like, well, maybe it's too good to be true that he's this inclusive. Like, he says, no one comes to the Father except through me. That is very exclusive.
Yeah, but we don't really understand what that means. I mean, there's a lot of what we talked about earlier, like the mystic and the mystery of the thing. Like, we act like we know what it means, and then different denominations really act like they know what it means, and they put a nail in that, and this is exact. And I'm like, how do you know that? You don't know. And even theologians, I can read you theologians who preached a sermon on this verse, and then another one that did it, and it's all different, and they're all learned, very intelligent, people. And I'm like, who do you believe? Well, then, in my opinion, this goes back to the personal relationship thing, because I've always struggled with that. I have a personal relationship with Jesus. It just seems so weird to me, because the truth of the matter is, he doesn't talk to me. Like, my relationship is, I read a book about a dude, And I talk to my imaginary friend in the sky, like, and I hope and believe that he's real and it's true, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't think I am, right? So our friendship is based on a whole bunch of things, different things. But at the end of the day, I look at you holistically as Danny and I go, okay, so like if you did something, you let's say you ghosted me in a text message, didn't hear back from you. I would say, let me think about Danny's character and evaluate this one instance based on everything I know about his character, as opposed to I'm just pissed because he didn't get back to me on this thing that was important to me, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you lost your phone, if it died, if it broke. I don't know any of those things. But because you're my friend, I give you the benefit of the doubt. And I think that goes back to our faith in a lot of ways, like looking at Jesus and going like, is this too good to be true? It is too good to be true. Like that's the beauty of it is to me is that it is too good to be true. It's too good to be true that the God of everything would die on a cross for my sins. You know, that's too good to be true. But I think he did.
I'm sick of that story.
Oh man, that's sad.
It's very sad.
Yeah.
But man, we're just really being honest right now. Yeah.
You're just sick of being told that because you hear that as you're a piece of crap.
Yeah, and that I like cannot be loved and cannot be welcomed and belong and accepted into God's family unless Jesus is like brutally murdered.
Well,
and I just want to be in the family, and they're like, I just want to be loved and be accepted and belong into God's family and not have some psycho like people dying and God being disgusted with me and then being appeased by Jesus. Like I get how people can see beauty in that, and I used to see beauty in that, but now I just see that I am such a liability.
Well, I think part of it is to like, and this isn't, so I'm not saying part of it's seeing your place in the story. Like, what character are you in this? Yeah. I think like you guys see the same Jesus dying on the cross and have and both see it from the same actionable thing happening, but you both understand it and process it very differently. And I was thinking even earlier as you were talking, like, I think just as much as like, hey, we met Jesus first, right? And then you met information first or whatever that is. Like, I think our faith origin stories impact us so greatly. Like as a pastor, we had to like write down like our testimony, right? Like how we came to know. And I have never been able to divorce my story of becoming a pastor from how people treated my friend Noah in high school and how that so I've always wanted to include the outsider. Now, I always have to tell myself and ask myself, how much is my bias of how I came to know faith and the story that's driven me define the story I'm living? Like, because I unapologetically and probably to a fault am an includer. And I'd say to a fault, like I've included people that didn't need to be included in things because I really wanted to be included. Yeah. And so I just wonder from like stories, like what, and this isn't like you tell this now, but you can if you want, but like, how did that origin story of the first catalytic moment of your faith happening, like mine being with this kid Noah, having to be isolated and ostracized and outcast, it informed how I reconciled with Jesus Faith Church, all of that. That informed me a ton. And I just think like a helpful thing for all of us listening, watching, and us here, it's like, I think we have to find those things because we are not people in a vacuum. Our experiences inform everything. It's one of the reasons like trauma-informed church is like a really hot thing right now, and trauma-informed pastors, because good, bad, or ugly, our faith is informed by those things. Yeah.
A lot of those words you just said I didn't understand because you're a lot smarter than me. But what I was thinking while he was saying all that was like, you're basically playing, remember that game Operation? And it's like the whole thing is your religious growing upness, which is not a word, but I'm an idiot. And you're trying to pick out the parts. You're trying to keep Jesus, but you're trying to pick out
the body.
The body is Jesus. Let me work this out. The body, the little the fat guy is Jesus with the red nose, and you're trying to pull out all that crud and that's really hard to do. It's really hard to dissect out of this entire body of this thing that you've been taught, just the icky parts.
So I'm ready to put the game away.
And so, you're going to put the lid on. Let's put it on the shelf. Maybe later we'll pull it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. And I am like, because of my belief system and my heart, I'm constantly like, here's going to be my rebuttal. So she doesn't think because I want you to feel the way I feel. I want the Jesus that I feel loves me for you to feel that Jesus.
I would love to believe in the Jesus you believe in. Like the
Me
way
too.
that you talk about Jesus and like the way that you say like you go, I think God is in love with me. Like that is so beautiful. And I have never felt that way.
Yeah. And shame on you if you're watching this and you did this to her.
Yeah. I think it is like an interesting bummer because it's like, again, you've been told about the same person, but you just like.
It's just a totally different lens.
Yeah.
Like I'm a photographer and a filmmaker, and you can watch these videos. You've probably seen the memes where it's like the person's face, and you go 200 millimeter lens looks vastly different than a 10 millimeter lens. 10 millimeters super wide, 200 millimeters super tight, right? And what you do is you get a lens that can go from one to the other. It's not and then they do it, and I'll clip it into this if I can find one. It's super interesting because the person could look like they have a fat face all the way to like a Doberman Pinscher, like, real skinny features. And that's just based on the lens that you're using or the way you're using that lens. And some people maybe they didn't have bad intentions, but they probably didn't. They probably were just taught it the way they were taught it. And then so forgive me for F-bombing you. I hope you can still meet the Jesus that I know. But anyway, the idea though that if you just undo the lens and stick the other lens on, it would just change the whole view. It changes totally how you can see the thing. It's fascinating to me.
Well, I appreciate your vulnerability, Emily, in doing this. Like, and Dustin, I think we need you on this side of the mic more often. Like we did say at lunch that essentially I am putting words out that I have become the least important cog in this machine. And so maybe I'll take some time off and you guys can have some conversation. But
we will actually fight though.
You guys might actually fight.
Yeah.
We fight often after the recording's over.
I mean, I still think we don't. I don't know what you consider a fight.
I consider any sort of disagreement a personal attack. So
So we fight a lot in your opinion. But I don't think so. I don't I've never once gotten mad at you or raised my voice or like.
And I'm never mad at you.
But that to me is a real fight.
I just think that you really are mad at. I just think you really don't respect my thoughts sometimes.
Oh
my God.
That hurts. You really think that?
Sometimes I just think you think I'm kind of dumb and
I don't think you're dumb at all.
Well, thanks.
I don't think you're dumb at all.
I think you do respect me. I'm sorry I said that.
No,
sometimes
it's okay.
I think that you don't respect some things that I think sometimes I say something and you're like, oh my God.
Well, like on every episode, you look and say, Dustin's not gonna like that one. And at lunch, you're like, I actually really agreed with that.
Yeah. I think
But it's again, it's because I take disagreement as a personal thing.
Right.
So that's not anything that you've done. That's you saying I disagree with this thing you said, and me hearing I disagree with you and you don't belong, which is all full circle.
Okay, so I heard that. I'm receiving that. But let me ask you this: how would then someone disagree with an Emily
It's a great question.
without having an Emily feel that way?
Oh, that's a really good
You could
question.
it could be you, Emily. Maybe it could be a different Emily, but it could also be you.
That's a very, very good question. I think I'm actually gonna bring up Danny.
Okay.
Someone knows how to do it. I'm totally kidding.
That's not me.
You talk about my mean text message?
No, you're really nice text message. Oh my God. We're just airing it all out. No, so Danny had this thing that he did about hell.
Yeah.
And he and I, it felt like
actually, if you were there, we did argue.
We kind of did in front of a lot of people.
There you go.
You would have been proud.
I am proud. That's what makes a good episode.
And Danny knows that it's very important for me to feel theologically respected. And you texted me afterward and you said, hey, thank you so much for doing this event. I disagree pretty strongly with some of the things you said, but I deeply theologically respect you. If not the same, then maybe more. And that was like, that just soothed the anxiety. I think that's the root of it, is it's this like anxiety of like, because again, what we talked about, that was my whole goal. All of growing up was to get older dudes to think I was smart and to think that my theological voice mattered. And so it's a soothing of an anxiety of like, well, I just went backwards in my goal.
Yeah.
Is that making more sense? I feel like
but let me ask you this question.
I think you're great.
Oh, I am great. Let me ask this question. So can a human not agree with someone's theology, still like the person, care for the person, respect the person, and think the person's smart?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of those boxes that you feel more comfortable being checked, right?
Yeah.
Because I want everybody to do those things for me too. I want them to like me, think I'm smart, whatever. I think no, I'm not smart, but anyway,
you're very smart.
Thank you. Lip service. Okay, so I'm not that smart. No, but here's the thing. But then also, like, so how can I respect you theologically and not agree with you theologically?
Yeah, I mean, phenomenal question. But I just think I need the reminder that you do.
Okay. Yeah,
like,
because
like Danny and I disagree, but I think he theologically respects me. And he reminds me of that a lot, because every time we disagree, I'm like, well, just blew it.
Yeah.
Yeah, part of it's like affirming, and for me, theological respect is not derived out of like same agreement. It's like, because we make the joke about who's smart all the time. Like, you truly are like the most learned person in this room. Like,
Probably.
you know, probably
Agreed.
more theologically than any of us. And
Well,
I think,
at least in her denomination.
Yeah.
One version of theology.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but I think like if I was going to say like, hey, let's go toe to toe. I'll go toe to toe with you, Methodist theology versus Calvinist. I think you mop the floor with me, because you know.
I think you're probably right.
Yeah, I think so. But my respect for you isn't derived out of you believe what I believe. It's like you. Actually, maybe somewhat the opposite of you. It's kind of funny. I'd rather step into the ring and have an argument with someone. That's where I get respect out of. Like, I'd rather disagree with you and have the conversation. And so for me, as an 8 on the year, I've talked about it before, like, I build trust and relationship out of that. So just having the conversation, like, I love that. Like, I don't need to agree with you. I just want to learn more what I believe by hearing what you believe and push you on that.
But is that respecting are you respecting her theologically, or are you just respecting her?
I think you respect my perspective.
I respect you theologically. I don't always respect your theology.
Yeah, and I don't care.
Like, I think theologically you're a brilliant mind. I don't always agree with the conclusions you've drawn, but I don't draw a connection between those. Mm-hmm. So, but that isn't like, in as much as like even the text, I remember saying like, I think I would love you to land where I land.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to waste a ton of, especially on a topic like that. Like, there are certain things I'm like, I just don't think that takes, it needs a lot of interest. I think it's sexy to talk about hell because people are like, oh, like what happens, right? People want to talk about that, but I'm like, I don't need to talk. It doesn't impact my life on a daily basis.
It will.
Until I die.
Oh my God. Bring some ice water.
Just give it time, bro.
Hey, when people say, what is the sexiest topic? First thing, I think, hell.
Yeah.
That just gets me.
I remember actually.
I'm totally kidding.
Something you said early on I don't know if this was pre-podcast even, but you had talked about how much you don't like when pastors say that. Like, it was a pastor buzzword, was saying things are sexy.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's because didn't Driscoll do it?
No,
Chandler did, yeah.
This new sexy trend called deconstruction.
Yeah.
Well, then I am the sexiest.
So. Listen, so like that, those are, you okay?
I think I'm going to make it. Trying to get to hell faster. So
yeah. Well, you're on your way, pal. So I thank you for letting me be on your podcast. Thank you for letting me be on your podcast. I want you to know right now, I respect you. I like you.
Aww.
I find you very funny as a comedian, because that's what girl comedians are called. Oh, it's not true. And I also I respect you theologically, so I can say that now because now I understand what it means. So I only understood what it meant. Now I do, and I respect you. And I'm gonna try really hard not to make you fall where I fall, like what you just said. Like, you'd like her to land where you land. But I want you to know that when I do argue back on that. It's because I want you to know the Jesus that I know. It's not because I want to be right. It's not because I want to have one of us be right or one of us be wrong. It's that I want you to have him snuggle up with you and make you feel like you're worth it. Does that make sense?
I also did not mean to like start something on the like. I don't. Was this like conflict or?
No.
Okay, just me.
No, there wasn't. No,
What's this conflict?
I'm not having any conflict.
No, okay, but like
When
I
you're
think
dumb
you're
as
awesome.
when you're dumb as a rock, you don't know when there's even conflict.
But
It's
I
great.
don't even see it as
Ignorance is
conflict. It was how I naturally interpret situations. It's not
Right.
anything you did. Like
No, I know.
But again, I appreciate you saying that, and I think it like back to that moment. I think it was a very powerful moment of like, I want to love and believe in the God you believe in. Truly, I do. I think that it is. I think that the way you see Jesus as a rebel, and the way you see God as someone who just loves you so much and loves everything about who you are, or loves who you are, I would love that. And I love hearing your perspective because it makes it feel like maybe it could be possible for me.
It is. I hope it is. But if that means you have to put the game back on the shelf for a while, then that's what it means. Because I don't think that like you said, I don't think that you're out of his hands. You know, if you choose to put the lid on the box and put it away, it would be if we're going to use these analogies like we've been thinking about. Like if it was one of my kids got real mad at me and just decided I haven't talked to my dad in a year because he pissed me off. You know, and I'm still his dad.
Absolutely.
I still love him. I still want to talk to him. I'm probably still going to hit him up. And if he just doesn't respond, I'm going to. My wife and I talked about this once. I said, if you ever leave me, I just want you to know that I don't care where you go. I'm just going to buy a house right next door. And if I can't, I'll just get a tent because I'm not leaving my kids, you know, it's not going to happen. And that's the way that I think God feels about us. I think that's what God feels about you. And so I think when and if you're ever ready to open the box back up and try, you know, I know he'll be, you know, he's ready. He's a gentleman.
And
it's like a regulation thing. Like
He made it all up, so there's not a lot of scholarship he has to do.
I'm very enraptured with the operation analogy right now because it's like I remember playing that as a kid. I'm a very competitive and a perfectionist. Don't like making mistakes. Mm-hmm. And the minute I hit the zappy thing once, the tension in like my body rises. And so it's like this idea of like, I'm really, like I love like the TikTokers of like gentle parenting or whatever, where they just be like, take a minute to like re-regulate and like take a deep breath. And then we can go back to trying the hard activity is like, that is how it feels. Like, I'm just going to get more and more tense and more upset if I just keep like hammering in at this point with the pinchers. And, I think it's the like putting it in the box and taking a breather and knowing or wanting to believe that God loves me no matter where I'm at in the game. Yeah.
You also need a game that doesn't buzz and yell at you every time you get it wrong, right? That's
well, the hope would be
come in, Candyland.
The hope would be that once she gets all of the religion out, then it's done. She doesn't have to stick. You don't have to stick the
You've done it.
Things in there anymore.
Gentle parenting. I think that whole concept is.
I know.
Listen,
I just think it's cute to watch.
I just imagine me trying to tell Knox, "Hey, buddy, can we take a few deep breaths?" Because I've said that, and I've just heard banshee screams out of this kid. Once he's worked up, he does need to calm himself down. But in the midst of it, it's like, and this might just be my own son. Like he's in it when he's in it.
Well, I heard a parent say gentle parenting is awesome for some kids, and not all kids can and will respond to it. I think that's a good thing.
Well, gentle parenting in my day was to go sit in the corner, and you'd sit in the corner and calm down. We've had it,
but that's experiencing rejection for your feelings. So another thing about gentle parenting, and that's what this episode's about.
I'm gonna title this episode "Gentle Parenting." I think
are we good?
I think we've done what we came here.
This was really good. I really liked this episode.
Yeah.
I think it was the best one so far, probably.
I agree.
I think so.
I think it was really raw.
I think it was honest, and I think it was more of what we set out to do in some ways. It was like we were at lunch, and we were like, this is really good. And we're like, this is a valuable conversation we don't want to keep to ourselves. And so we shared it with the world, and I'm glad we did it.
Yeah. And in the future, if it keeps going on, we can, and you are full on, out of the crew, out of the tribe.
Don't belong.
Yeah. We can just do a pastor. We could say a pastor, a jerk, and an atheist all walked into, like, we could be that could be the thing.
Well, that's actually that's like a band name.
Yeah.
Should we start a band?
Yeah.
Okay. No. Anyway. Comment below your thoughts on gentle parenting and embrace the journey.
This is a Chapel Media podcast.